Welcome to the Bible Mindset. Powerful, motivational, biblical sermon by Tony Evans. Ladies and gentlemen, saints of the Most High God, I want to begin by shaking the ground beneath your spirit and declaring this. You are not average. You are not ordinary. You are not here to blend in. You are born to stand out. You are chosen, marked, set apart, and whether the world applauds it or resents it, your anointing cannot be ignored. You may be wondering why people pull away when you show up, why the room shifts when you enter, why they whisper behind your back, but never to your face. It's not your personality. It's not your past. It's your anointing. It's the oil that rests on your life. The invisible power that unsettles the comfortable and convicts the complacent. You carry something they can't explain, and because they can't explain it, they resist it. When you're anointed, you'll be misunderstood. People will question your motives, not because you're doing wrong, but because your presence exposes what's broken in them. Your very walk with God becomes a mirror. It reveals what they've ignored, what they've suppressed, what they refuse to change. You're not the problem. Your light just makes their darkness hard to hide. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air shift, not because you said anything, not because of what you were wearing, but simply because you showed up? That's not charisma. That's not presence. That's the anointing on your life doing what it was designed to do. Disrupt spiritual stagnation and expose everything that's not aligned with God's will. People may never say it to your face, but they feel it in their spirit. You carry something sacred, and it makes the comfortable nervous. The anointing is not subtle. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't blend in. It walks boldly and speaks loudly, even in silence. You don't have to open your mouth to make an impact. Just being in the room causes people to look twice. Why? Because your presence announces an unseen kingdom. When you show up, heaven shows up with you. And that kind of presence, the kind birthed in prayer, forged through fire and cultivated in secret, cannot be ignored. Don't let anyone convince you that you're too much. You were never created to tone it down for other people's comfort. You weren't called to shrink so others don't feel insecure. When you carry the anointing, your very existence becomes a confrontation. It confronts laziness. It confronts compromise. It confronts spiritual deadness. And some people would rather be left alone in darkness than deal with the light you carry. That's not your fault, it's your purpose. There's a reason Joseph's brothers hated his dream. There's a reason Saul felt threatened by David. There's a reason Jesus stirred rage among religious leaders. The anointing exposes. It reveals what's fake. It draws a line between form and power, between status and surrender, between religion and relationship. And whenever the real shows up, the fake can't stay comfortable. You don't just walk in buildings, you shift the atmosphere. You don't just speak, you release a sound that heaven backs. That's why some people can't handle being around you too long. That's why conversations change when you approach. That's why silence falls when you enter. Your anointing disturbs every demon hiding in complacency. It rattles chains that others have learned to live with. It interrupts cycles that have gone unchecked for years. And for people who are content in dysfunction, you become a divine disruption. But let's be clear. This isn't about arrogance. It's not about pride. It's about spiritual reality. The anointing isn't personality-based. It's not something you can fabricate or fake. You don't earn it by impressing people. It's poured on you by God for a specific reason at a specific time for a specific mission. And when it rests on you, it carries weight, spiritual weight, supernatural authority, kingdom influence. You walk with divine permission to change environments, shift atmospheres, and disturb every demonic system operating in the background. That's why you've never been able to just fit in. That's why certain rooms never felt right, even when you tried to force yourself to be accepted. Because your presence is not supposed to feel familiar to the flesh, it's meant to stir the spirit. The anointing on your life creates movement where there's been stillness, tension where there's been false peace, and hunger where there's been spiritual drought. You don't walk into spaces to adapt, you walk in to bring change. There are people who will try to put labels on you too deep, too intense, too much. But what they don't realize is they're not reacting to you, they're reacting to the oil you carry. They're reacting to the heavenly assignment stitched into your DNA. You were never meant to blend into lukewarm culture. You were meant to set it ablaze. You were never meant to be another face in the crowd. You were designed to shake foundations. You were never called to make people feel safe in their sin. You were called to call them higher. Some of the most gifted, called, and anointed people are walking through life confused, not because they lack clarity in their purpose, but because they keep internalizing other people's discomfort as their responsibility. But let's get something straight right now. You are not responsible for how others respond to the weight on your life. You are not here to manage other people's insecurities. You are not called to be a comforter of egos. You are called to be a carrier of truth. Stop dimming your light to make someone else feel okay in their shadow. The very thing they're uncomfortable with is what God placed on you to confront what they refuse to change. When you carry God's presence, when His oil rests on your life, it disrupts every false identity in the room. It doesn't matter how softly you speak, how kind you are, or how quietly you try to walk, your presence still speaks volumes. Because it's not just you showing up, it's heaven backing your assignment. People will say you've changed. People will claim you think you're better. People will distance themselves not because of something you said, but because of who you're becoming. And here's the truth most won't admit. They liked you better when you were broken because your brokenness didn't challenge them. Your bondage made them comfortable. Your silence kept their dysfunction safe. But now that you're whole, now that you've accepted your assignment, now that you've stopped shrinking and started standing, your growth has made them uncomfortable with their excuses. You can't carry this kind of oil and not stir something in people. You are born to break patterns, to confront strongholds, to walk in clarity when others are lost in confusion. And that kind of power doesn't come without friction. The problem isn't you, it's what your presence reveals. You shine light in places they've worked hard to keep hidden. You bring accountability where they've gotten used to passivity. You force people to confront what they've numbed. But hear this loud and clear. It's not your job to apologize for your anointing. You didn't anoint yourself. You didn't earn this mantle through manipulation or performance. God chose you. Heaven appointed you. You were handpicked, molded, tested, and positioned by divine strategy. And the people who feel uneasy around you are responding to something they can't define but can't deny. That's not about your attitude. That's about your authority. Don't carry their projections like their truth. Don't wear their discomfort like it's your shame. You are not a mistake. You are not too intense. You are not too deep. You are exactly what this moment in history needs. Stop holding back what God gave you to release just because it shakes people's comfort zones. If they are more committed to staying the same than stepping into what God has for them, that is their decision. But it's not your weight to carry. You were born to bring a standard, to raise the temperature, to ignite revival. And revival doesn't start with acceptance. It starts with disruption. If your presence never convicts, never agitates, never presses against the grain, then what are you carrying? The anointing is not neutral. It's not passive. It doesn't walk in and keep things as they are. It shifts, it stirs, it unsettles. And that unsettled feeling in others is proof that what's on your life is real and active. There will be people who walk away. Let them walk. There will be people who question your motives. Let them question. There will be people who accuse you of being too much. Let them label you. Their reaction does not define your identity. Their discomfort does not rewrite your assignment. Their disapproval is not an indictment on your purpose. They can gossip, criticize, misunderstand, and retreat. But your mission still stands and your oil still flows. Say, there's something deeply painful about being rejected, especially when it comes from people you love, people you supported, people you've never meant to threaten. But let me pull back the curtain and expose a deeper truth that many never discern. Rejection often has nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with what you carry. The moment you step into your God-given identity, the moment you embrace your calling, you become a mirror that reflects what others are trying to hide. And when that mirror shows them something they're not ready to confront, the easiest response is to push you away. Joseph wasn't rejected because he was wrong. He was rejected because he was anointed. His brothers weren't reacting to his dream because it didn't make sense. They were reacting because deep down they knew it did. When the hand of God is evident on your life, even those closest to you can become uncomfortable, defensive, and even hostile. Not because of your attitude, not because of your ambition, but because your anointing exposes dormant greatness in others that they've buried under excuses, fear, and complacency. Here's a truth you must let settle in your spirit. Rejection doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it's delivered by the hands of those who are supposed to support you. But what they reject, God will redirect. And what they try to silence, God will spotlight. The oil on your life is not dependent on their affirmation. Their ability to understand your calling is not a prerequisite for your assignment to move forward. In fact, rejection is often the transportation method God uses to relocate you into places where your purpose can fully manifest. The problem isn't that you're arrogant. The problem is that you've accepted what God said about you. And now your boldness sounds like pride to people who are still battling insecurity. The problem is that your vision demands change, and change threatens comfort. Some people don't hate you, they hate the challenge your life brings. They loved you when you were quiet, when you played small, when you waited to be invited. But now that you've stepped into your authority, now that you've realized you don't need permission to be powerful, their respect has turned into resistance. But let me tell you something powerful. Your rejection was prophetic. Every time someone walked away, every time a door was closed in your face, every time you were overlooked, it was God positioning you to rely fully on Him and not on the applause of man. You're not a victim of their rejection. You are a vessel protected by heaven. God knew if they embraced you too quickly, you'd settle for approval over anointing. But He loved you too much to let you get comfortable in shallow spaces. You don't need to beg for seats at tables you were never meant to sit at. You don't need to keep knocking on doors that were slammed shut for your protection. You carry too much oil to be confined by people who only operate in convenience. Rejection is often revelation. It reveals who can't handle your destiny. It reveals who was only committed to your past, not your future. It reveals who loved the old version of you, not the one God is raising up now. So let them talk. Let them question. Let them draw their conclusions. Your assignment is still active. Your calling is still confirmed. And your oil is still flowing. Don't let temporary rejection blind you to eternal purpose. The very thing they tried to push away is what heaven is using to pull you into promise. Rejection didn't remove your anointing, it revealed it. It didn't cancel your calling, it clarified it. You were never meant to be accepted by everyone. You were marked to be sent by God. There is a dangerous misconception in the minds of many believers. The belief that the anointing comes to make life easier, to attract applause, or to open doors without opposition. But if you truly understood the weight of the anointing, you would know it doesn't exist to keep you comfortable. It exists to make you dangerous to darkness. You weren't anointed to sit still. You were anointed to disrupt, to confront, to build, to war, to heal, to tear down what's fake and raise up what's divine. The anointing on your life was never intended to coddle you. It was designed to stretch you, break you, and shape you for impact. It was meant to send you into environments that look impossible and equip you to do the impossible through God's power. That's why your life has never been ordinary. That's why your path has never been smooth. Because when you carry something from heaven, hell recognizes your potential long before you do, and it will do everything it can to keep you distracted by comfort and convenience. The anointing doesn't show up just to bless you. It shows up to build you. It doesn't arrive to make you popular, it arrives to make you effective. People crave the stage, but don't understand the strain. They want the platform, but not the pressure. They want the oil, but not the crushing. But there is no anointing without pain. There is no power without process. The oil that flows from your life comes from the places where you were wounded, refined, tested, and proven. Comfort is the enemy of calling. God did not call you to be cozy. He called you to be commissioned. If you ever feel stretched, if you ever feel isolated, if you ever feel pressed on every side, it's a sign that you're in the middle of your preparation. The anointing doesn't keep you from the fire, it keeps you alive in the fire. It doesn't remove the storm, it gives you authority through the storm. God doesn't anoint people to keep them safe, He anoints them to walk into dangerous territory and take territory for the kingdom. If the anointing were about ease, Jesus would have never carried a cross. If the anointing were about acceptance, the prophets would have never been stoned. If it were about being light, Paul would have never been imprisoned. The anointing will call you into rooms where you don't feel ready, into battles that seem bigger than you, into assignments that threaten your flesh and expose your limits. But that's the point. It's not about your strength. It's about His Spirit flowing through your surrender. Don't confuse divine calling with worldly comfort. They rarely walk hand in hand. If you're looking for comfort, stay in the crowd. But if you're ready for calling, step into the fire, step into the tent, step into the unknown. Because your assignment requires your discomfort. The very things that make you uncomfortable are the things that make you grow. God will use your discomfort to sharpen your discernment. He'll use your discomfort to expose your dependency on Him. He'll use your discomfort to push you into places you would never have chosen but were always destined to stand in. The anointing will force you to evolve. It will strip away your need for applause. It will destroy your craving for validation. It will make you uncomfortable in rooms where you used to feel safe because you've outgrown shallow living. You're not just marked, you're mandated. And mandates don't come with cushions. They come with crosses. They come with assignments. They come with divine weight that doesn't feel good but produces glory. So don't misinterpret the pressure you feel. Don't run from the tension. Don't seek a softer road. The fact that it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not God. In fact, the discomfort is often the confirmation that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Because when God anoints someone, He doesn't anoint them to sit. He anoints them to move mountains, break systems, raise standards, and walk boldly into places that terrify the flesh but glorify the Spirit. One of the greatest traps that the enemy sets for the anointed is the need for human approval. It's a subtle trap. It looks harmless at first, just the desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be affirmed. But left unchecked, it becomes a cage that keeps powerful people stuck, waiting for permission to move when God already gave them authority to walk. If you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life trying to convince people who were never called to see you, to accept you, to approve what God already established before they ever knew your name. You don't need a round of applause to validate your assignment. You don't need the crowd to understand your calling. You don't need a vote when you've already been chosen. When heaven opens its mouth and speaks destiny over your life, every other opinion becomes irrelevant. The authority on your life isn't rooted in popularity, it's rooted in obedience. It's rooted in the private yes you gave God when no one else was watching. It's rooted in the quiet tears you cried in secret, the fasts you endured in silence, the spiritual battles you fought that nobody clapped for but heaven witnessed. You have to stop asking people for what only God can give. Stop looking around for green lights from people who haven't been in your process. They weren't there when you were crushed for this anointing. They didn't see what it cost you. So how could they possibly understand the weight of your yes? You don't need their platform. You don't need their spotlight. You don't need their invitation. If God called you, then walk like it. Talk like it. Move like it. Heaven doesn't consult with man before it releases mantle. Authority doesn't wait in line. It walks through doors no one else sees. It speaks when others stay silent. It shifts the room without announcing itself. And the moment you begin to walk in your God-given authority, you will instantly feel resistance from those still waiting for man's approval. But don't let that stop you. Don't let their hesitation become your hesitation. What they call arrogance, heaven calls boldness. What they label as doing too much, God calls obedience without apology. If you're going to be effective in this season, you have to grow comfortable with being misunderstood. You have to be okay with being overlooked, underappreciated, and even dismissed by the very ones you thought would support you. Because God will often test your authority by placing you in environments where your validation won't come from the crowd. He'll put you in rooms where no one sees you, just to see if you'll still stand like you've been sent. He'll allow you to be isolated so you can be elevated. He'll strip away the applause so you learn to hear his voice above all others. You were never meant to live off the affirmation of man. You were meant to live by the authority of God. Your yes is enough. Your obedience is enough. Your anointing is enough. You don't need their credentials, their title, their endorsement. David was anointed in a field, not a palace. Jesus was baptized in a river, not a throne room. Real authority comes from divine appointment, not earthly approval. The moment you start needing approval is the moment you start walking in full power. Because now you're not held back by opinions. You're not manipulated by applause. You're not swayed by silence. You are rooted, grounded, sure, unshakable. You move when God says move. You speak when heaven releases a word. You act when the Spirit nudges, not when people give permission. Let this settle in your soul. You're not waiting to be crowned by men. You've already been commissioned by God. What you carry didn't come through status, it came through surrender. And once you know who sent you, you'll never second guess your authority again. The moment you said yes to your calling, truly said yes, the enemy marked you. Not because he's stronger, not because he has the final say, but because he recognized the threat you've become. Hell doesn't tremble over titles, degrees, or popularity. Hell trembles when a believer walks in their anointing with conviction and clarity. You weren't born to be passive. You were born to disrupt demonic patterns, to interrupt cycles of bondage, to set captives free by simply walking in who God made you to be. This is why warfare increases every time you step deeper into purpose. This is why some days you wake up feeling attacked before you even say a word. Because your life carries weight in the spirit realm, and darkness knows it. The devil doesn't waste energy on people who aren't a problem. He's threatened by your influence. He's intimidated by your obedience. He's terrified that you'll finally realize just how dangerous you are when fully submitted to God. The reason your atmosphere has felt heavy, the reason certain people have turned cold, the reason warfare has broken out around your peace is because the oil on your life is not silent. It speaks, it shakes, it dismantles strongholds. You're not just gifted, you're anointed. And that difference changes everything. Gifts impress people, but anointing terrifies devils. You don't just entertain, you break yokes. You don't just show up, you confront unseen realms. And every time you walk in alignment, darkness loses ground. Don't be surprised that the attacks come hardest when you're walking in obedience. Don't be confused when the opposition shows up out of nowhere. It's not coincidence, it's confirmation. The warfare you're facing is a result of the weight you carry. You're not being attacked because you're weak. You're being attacked because you're effective. Your presence disrupts spiritual laziness. Your prayers open portals. Your worship shifts dimensions. Your yes unlocks destinies. That kind of power is not ignored by hell. It's targeted. But here's what the enemy forgot. You're not fighting for victory. You're fighting from victory. The Spirit of the living God has sealed you, empowered you, and covered you. The same oil that makes you a target is the same oil that makes you untouchable. The enemy can form weapons, but he can't prosper them. He can send resistance, but he can't stop the mission. The darkness may surround, but it cannot overtake what God has illuminated. When you walk in that authority, boldly, fearlessly, unapologetically, you begin to fulfill the purpose that makes hell nervous. Your words carry weight. Your presence carries power. That's why some rooms feel tense when you enter. That's why some people don't invite you back. You're not there to entertain emotions. You're there to break atmospheres open. The anointing on your life doesn't just bless, it exposes. It tears down every demonic agenda that has been hiding behind culture, comfort, or complacency. The enemy fears your clarity. He fears your discipline. He fears your persistence, because those are the things that unleash heaven on earth. This is not the season to shrink. This is not the time to be silent. You cannot afford to dilute your voice, tame your fire, or suppress your gift just because it makes the enemy uncomfortable. You weren't built to be liked. You were built to be a weapon of truth, a weapon of righteousness, a weapon forged in the fires of affliction, carrying the weight of glory that doesn't come from man but from intimacy with God. You have to know what you're carrying. You have to protect it, guard it, nurture it, stay aligned, stay consecrated, stay alert, because what you carry is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. You are not average. You are not weak. You are not lost. You are chosen, commissioned, armed. And when you stand in your anointing, even without saying a word, hell has to back up. That's the level of threat you are. That's the level of fire that rests on you. That's the kind of anointing that makes demons scatter and chains shatter.